Adaora, Chinonso, and Titi were once the pride of St. Teresa's Academy. Bright, ambitious, and full of potential, they had big dreams. Adaora wanted to become a doctor, Chinonso had her eyes set on engineering, and Titi dreamed of studying law. Life at school was simple, and their future seemed certain. But everything changed when they met the older girls in the school hostel. These girls were part of the cool crowd, always posting flashy pictures on Instagram, dining in fancy restaurants, and making mysterious late-night calls. They spoke about a world Adaora, Chinonso, and Titi had never imagined, runs, where young girls dated older, wealthy men for money. At first, the idea sounded shocking and wrong. But the allure of designer clothes, lavish gifts, and the thrill of living a life of luxury quickly became too tempting to ignore. Soon, the girls were sneaking off to meet these men in secret, convinced they could handle it. They believed they could keep their studies intact while living this new life. What they didn't realize, though, was that with each run, they were slipping further away from the dreams they once held so dear. At first, everything felt exciting. Adaora received a brand new phone, Chinonso was given a designer handbag, and Titi enjoyed lavish dinners at posh restaurants. The perks of their new lives seemed worth the risk. But the glamour came with a hidden price. Each time they met their sponsors, they had to pretend everything was fine, forcing smiles through uncomfortable conversations, fending off unwanted advances, and lying to their families and friends about where they were going. Their schoolwork began to suffer. Adaora, once a top student, started to fall behind in class. Chinonso, always focused and disciplined, became distracted and disconnected. Titi, who was once the life of the group, now avoided eye contact and grew quieter with every passing day. The girls tried to keep up appearances, convinced that the money and gifts could make up for the slipping grades and broken relationships. But their futures, once so bright, now seemed to be slipping through their fingers. Adaora's mother, once proud of her daughter's hard work, began to notice the change in her. Chinonso's friends no longer saw the girl who had dreams of being an engineer. Titi, once so full of confidence, seemed to fade into the background. The double life was beginning to take its toll. Things took a sharp turn when Chinonso was invited to a posh hotel room by a client who was far older than the men she was used to seeing. At first, he was charming, offering her more gifts and making promises of a life full of luxury. But soon, his true intentions became clear. What started as a flattering offer quickly spiraled into something much darker. Chinonso was left shaken, humiliated, and trapped in a situation that left her feeling powerless. She returned to school that evening, her once confident attitude completely shattered. The girl who had been full of dreams and ambition was now unrecognizable, tearful and withdrawn. Titi and Adaora, though pretending to carry on as usual, were deeply affected by what had happened to their friend. For the first time, they saw the consequences of their choices in full force. The glitz and glamour no longer seemed worth it. The money, the gifts, the designer clothes, none of it mattered when they realized what they had truly lost: their dignity, their sense of self, and their futures. It was clear that they had paid a heavy price. The real question was, could they find a way out before this dangerous world consumed them entirely? Adaora was the first to make a move. Seeing Chinonso in such pain was a turning point for her. It struck her hard that they had been living in denial, believing they could control their situation. The truth was undeniable: they couldn't. They had gambled with their futures, health, and safety, all for the fleeting pleasure of material wealth. Realizing the gravity of their choices, Adaora knew something had to change. She went to Miss Ngozi, their teacher and role model, and confessed everything. Miss Ngozi had always sensed that something wasn't right, but now the full truth was out in the open. Together, they devised a plan to report the older men exploiting the girls. It was a risky decision. Some of the men involved were powerful, their influence far-reaching. But Adaora's resolve was unshakable. She knew she had to do whatever it took to protect her friends and herself. At first, Chinonso was reluctant. She still felt the weight of the shame she carried. But Titi, who had been silent for so long, finally found her voice. Together, the girls took the courageous step to break free from the chains that had bound them. It wasn't easy. but they were determined to expose the ugly truth and reclaim their lives. The aftermath of their decision was both difficult and liberating. The men who had exploited them were arrested, and the school authorities took action, though the damage had already been done. The girls faced suspensions, public disgrace, and the loss of their once promising futures. Yet, despite everything, they had survived the worst of it. In the months that followed, Adaora, Chinonso, and Titi worked hard to rebuild their lives. They focused on regaining the trust of their families and teachers, knowing it would be a long journey. Adaora threw herself back into her studies, determined to reclaim her dream of becoming a doctor. Chinonso, having found the strength to confront her shame, began to excel once again in her academic work, motivated by the painful lessons she had learned. Titi, too, threw herself into her studies, finding a renewed sense of purpose, driven by the desire to regain control of her life. The girls were healing, piece by piece. Though the scars of their past would never fully disappear, they had come to understand the cost of abandoning their dreams for temporary pleasures. What had seemed so tempting before now appeared hollow. They had a long road ahead, but they had learned the hard way that their futures were worth far more than any momentary satisfaction.